In this class meeting, we're going to study the fourth fable in Aesop's Fables. So take a minute, get your notes ready. Get your notes ready. At the top of your page, write your name and today's date. Today is March 31st, 2022. March 31st, the last day of March. So get your notes ready. At the top of the page, write the name of the course. The name of the course is Aesop's Fables. And this is lesson 4. Lesson 4. And the title of the fable is The Stag Looking into the Pool. The stag looking into the pool. Our fourth fable, the fourth fable we're studying of Aesop's Fables. So far, we learned that Aesop's Fables teach us moral philosophy, right? They're not just kids' stories. They're not just children's stories. This isn't just reading time. You don't just learn some cute stories. They're moral lessons. They teach us moral philosophy. Later on in your studies, you'll study Aristotle's Ethics, hopefully. Aristotle's Ethics will teach you moral lessons, but much more deeply. But you can't understand Aristotle's teaching now. So rather than just sit around and stare at the wall or watch cartoons all day, you can get started with moral philosophy by studying Aesop's Fables. Okay? They teach us moral lessons. And we learn that whenever we read a fable, we need to make sure we read it carefully. We learn all the details of the fable, because all the details matter. If you leave details out, you won't understand the fable. Aesop was a wise man, and he would not write something that wasn't necessary to the story. If he writes something in the story, it's important, and you need to pay attention to all the details. We learned that every fable has a moral lesson, or has a number of moral lessons. And we learned that you can think about these lessons as a child, and you can learn good moral lessons from these fables. But if you keep thinking about these fables through the rest of your life, you will find that they're helpful to you no matter how old you are, no matter how complicated your life gets. You could own your own business. You could be the president of the United States, and Aesop's Fables would still be helpful to you. Help you make good decisions. Help you avoid making bad decisions. So Aesop's Fables are not just children's stories. They're important moral lessons. So far we studied the fable of the two frogs. We learned about the two frogs, and the moral of that fable was to be careful before you make a decision, to look before you leap. In the second fable, we learned about Jupiter and the camel. We learned that the camel was not thoughtful, and he complained about his life because he didn't have powerful claws or teeth like the other animals. And he complained, and he made God angry, and God punished him for complaining and not thinking. The reason why God made him the way he did was because God actually made the camel valuable, and the camel didn't need to defend himself. But the camel was not thoughtful. And then in the third fable, we studied the lion hunting with other beasts. We said a lion went out to hunt with a heifer, a goat, and what else? A sheep. And they made an agreement. They didn't think about whom they were making the agreement with. They didn't think about the details of the agreement or how they would make sure everyone kept the agreement. And when the time came, the goat caught a stag and the lion took it all. And we talked about the moral lesson in the fable of the lion hunting with the other beasts. This is our fourth fable, and we're learning about the stag looking into the pool. And before we get started with the fable, what is a stag? What is a stag? It's a male goat. What do you know? Not a male goat, a male deer. Sorry. What do you know about a male deer? How do you know a male deer from a female deer? Horns, right? They have antlers. So a stag is a male deer. And the male deer is identified, usually because they're bigger, but most easily by their antlers. That's what their horns are called. Antlers. What do they use their antlers for? Protection, yeah, for defending themselves. So their horns, their antlers, are a source of defense. So when a stag looks and sees his antlers, what do you think? He thinks, man, I look tough, right? His antlers are his strength, his muscles, like as it were, right? He fights with his antlers. And as bucks get older, as they get older, their antlers get bigger, right? So we have a fable of a stag looking into a pool. Notice it doesn't say he's drinking from the pool. It doesn't say a stag drinking at a pool. It says a stag looking into the pool. So he's looking into the pool, thinking about something, and in this fable we're going to learn about what he's thinking about. Okay? So we know what a stag is, and we have some idea of what this fable might be about. So let's read the fable, and remember, when we read the fable, we have to pay attention to the details. We have to pay attention to the details. If you complete an assignment on Aesop's Fables, and you write a paraphrase of the fable, or you write the moral of the fable, or talk about the characters of the fable, and you submit that fable, that assignment to me for grading, and I can see that you didn't pay attention to the details, I'm not going to give you credit for the assignment. All right? I'm going to look and see if you actually paid attention to the details. So what some students do when they're lazy is I'll ask, what is the moral of this fable? And they'll write something lazy like, we should be good. That's not the moral of this fable, right? Don't be bad. That's not the moral of a fable. The morals are more detailed than that. The lessons are better than that. And when I read your assignment, I'm looking to see if you really paid attention to the details, thought about it, and learned the moral of the fable. Because it's not some lazy general idea. The morals are very clear, they're specific, and they're based on the details of the story. All right? So as we read this fable, let's make sure we pay attention to all the details of the fable. The stag looking into the pool. The stag looking into the pool. A stag drinking at a, look at the details, drinking at a clear pool, admired the handsome look of his spreading antlers. The stag, drinking at a clear pool, admired the handsome look of his spreading antlers, but was much displeased at the slim and ungainly appearance of his legs. "What a glorious pair of branching horns," said he. "How gracefully they hang over my forehead. What an agreeable air or appearance they give my face." He says, man, my antlers look good. "But as for my spindle shanks of legs," spindle shanks, like spokes on a bike wheel. He says, my legs look like spokes. Okay? "But as for my spindle shanks of legs, I am heartily ashamed of them." So he's admiring the look of his antlers. Notice he's admiring the handsome look of his antlers, admiring the appearance of his antlers. And he is ashamed of the appearance of his legs. Are the antlers given to him for appearance? No. Are his legs designed for appearance? So what's his problem? He's judging himself by what? Appearance. And that's not what these things are for. The antlers are not for staring at yourself in a pool. And your legs are not for standing in front of a mirror or taking pictures of yourself. That's not what they're for. But that's what he's thinking about. He's thinking about how he looks in the pool and how he looks to other people. Thinking about his looks. Look at these big, glorious, branching horns. Look at how they hang over my forehead. What an agreeable appearance they give my face, as if the antlers are just decorations on his head. And look at these legs. Ugh, so skinny and ugly, as if they're decorations, right? These words were scarcely out of his mouth. He barely finished saying these words when all of a sudden he saw some huntsmen and a pack of hounds, hunting dogs. As he's standing there looking into the pool, as he's bragging about his antlers and how glorious they look, as he's looking at his legs and saying how ashamed he is of his legs, at that very moment, the words barely got out of his mouth when all of a sudden he sees hunters coming with their dogs. His despised legs soon placed him at a distance from his followers. So his legs, which he despised and made fun of, was ashamed of, his legs did their job. They saved him and got him away to safety. But on entering the forest, his horns got entangled at every turn. Everywhere he moved, his horns got entangled, so that the dogs soon reached him and made an end of him. And he exclaimed, "Mistaken fool that I was! Had it not been for these wretched horns, my legs would have saved my life." And that's the end of the fable of the stag looking into the pool. All right? So, we saw as he looked into the pool, he was admiring his horns and he despised his legs. He admired his horns because of how they looked. and he despised his legs because of how they looked. But when God created the stag, when God designed the stag, he didn't design his antlers for looks. He didn't design his legs for looks. God was good to the stag, and he gave him legs that would allow him to get away from his enemies. He gave him legs that would save his life, that could save his life. The stag's legs were better than the dog's legs. The stag's legs were better than the huntsman's legs. Right? He actually had the best legs, but he didn't like the way that they looked. And his horns, they might be useful to fight with other deer, but when a hunter is chasing you, and when dogs are chasing you, and you have to try to get away, those horns aren't helpful. And the bigger they get, the bigger your horns get, the more they spread, the more danger they bring. First of all, when hunters go out to hunt, let me ask you this. When hunters go out to the hunt, do they look for deer with small horns or deer with big horns? Big horns, right? Hunters boast about how big the antlers are on deer that they shoot. They actually look for bucks with the biggest set of antlers. So what happens to a deer, the bigger its antlers get, what happens? More hunters are looking for him. So the bigger his antlers get, and the more arrogant he gets looking at his antlers in the pool, the more danger he comes into, because his antlers, the bigger they get, the more trouble they bring him. And he's sitting there admiring his antlers as they grow and bring him into more and more danger. And he's looking down at his legs, and he's ashamed of his legs, even though they are his only hope. He doesn't have fangs. He can't climb a tree. He can't fly. The only hope that he has to escape for his life is his legs. And they're perfect for getting away. They're perfect. Deer can run faster than any animal in the woods. They can jump over tall fences, jump over bushes. The legs of the deer are perfect, but the horns get him in trouble. And yet there he is staring at himself in the pool saying, "Oh, my horns, look, they're getting bigger and bigger. Oh, they're so beautiful, so handsome." And then in the end he says, "Mistaken fool that I was." What a dummy, thinking my horns were beautiful as they got bigger, not realizing that they're the cause of all my trouble. Not only did they cause the hunters to chase me, but they got me trapped in the forest. And my legs would have gotten me to safety. I would have been fine if it wasn't for these stupid antlers that cost me my life. So what's the moral lesson? What's the moral lesson? The moral lesson is when you judge things, when you judge something, and you judge whether it's good or bad, you should not judge things by appearances. Do not judge by appearances. You should be taking notes. You should not judge things by appearances, because things aren't necessarily created for their appearance. And if you're worried about appearances, you need to think about whether or not you are even created to appear a certain way. Don't judge things by appearance, because appearance may not matter. Something that's unattractive or something that we might consider to be ugly, the way it looks, might actually be very useful. might even save our life. Don't judge people by their appearance. Don't judge things by their appearance. And so we have to ask ourselves, if we're not supposed to judge by appearance, if we're not supposed to judge by appearances, what should we judge by? We should judge by whether or not a thing does what it's created to do. Whether or not a thing is able to do what it's created to do. And we should call something good, that does what it's supposed to do. We should not judge by appearances, but we should judge things according to their purpose and whether they're able to do what they're supposed to do. That's righteous, or that's reasonable judgment. So the best person in your life could be a person who's small and ugly, but that's not what a person is for. People weren't created to win beauty pageants, right? That's not why God made us, so we could have a big contest and see who's got the prettiest hair of all the boys. Who's got the biggest muscles? Who's got the tallest body? Who can run the fastest? That's not what man was created for. Horses can run faster than you. Oxen are stronger than you. Animals can do more work than you. Tractors are more powerful than you. Cranes can lift more than you can. We don't need people to be fast or strong. What was man created for? Man was created to know, love, and serve God. He was created to be in charge of the natural world. He was created in God's image to live with reason, to live wisely, to know and to do God's will. That's what man was created for. So when you judge men, do you judge them by their appearance, like the deer judging his antlers? Or do you judge them for whether or not they're able to actually do what they were created to do? Whether or not they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? Or do you judge them because they have a cool haircut, or nice shoes, or a nice bike? Right? We need to judge justly, judge reasonably. Don't judge according to appearances. And the deer's own words tell us, "Mistaken fool that I was. Had it not been for these wretched horns, these useless, miserable horns that I took pride in, if it wasn't for these horns, my legs would have saved my life." So the moral of this fable is that we have to judge things according to their purpose, not judge by appearances. Judge things according to their purpose. Imagine if this deer had gotten in a fight and lost the fight and had his antlers knocked off his head. And he had no antlers, or he had a broken piece of an antler on his head, and he looked ridiculous. And he looked in the pool, and he looked at himself and saw these ugly broken antlers, half antlers or no antlers. And he would have sat around every day saying, "Oh, my antlers look so terrible." But when the hunters came and the dogs came, what would have happened to that deer? He would have been safe. And so losing his antlers, he could have sat around and complained about it and fussed about how he looked. But that bad event in his life could have saved his life. And that's how life often works. A lot of times we experience things that we think are bad because we're thinking about something silly. We're not thinking about the purpose of our life. We're thinking about something else. And something that we think is bad happens to us. And it actually turns out to be something that saves us or helps us. We need to be thoughtful. We need to not judge according to appearances, but always think about the purposes of things. And when you think about the purposes of things, and then you judge, you'll understand why things are the way that they are, and you'll have reasonable judgment. You won't sit there like this deer saying, "Mistaken fool that I was." All right? So this is the fable of the stag looking into the pool. We've already talked about the character, the stag. The hunters, I don't think it tells us about the hunters, whether they were on foot walking or whether they were on horses, but the hunters and the dogs. Why does Aesop choose dogs? Well, dogs are used to hunt. Normally, dogs aren't sent in to catch deer. A hunter doesn't send his dogs in to go tackle the deer. Usually, they just use dogs to chase the deer out of the woods into an open field or something like that so they can shoot it. They just use the deer to find, they just use the dogs to find the deer and chase them into openings. But the deer here is caught by a dog. He's caught by an animal that's not even as fast as he is. And that's part of the point of the story. He ended up being caught by an animal that he's faster than because of his horns. All right, so we see the moral of the story, the deer's error, judging according to appearances rather than according to purposes. We see that the dogs were chosen because they're not as fast as deer, and yet they catch the foolish deer. And the deer was used because he has these antlers, which are impressive to look at, but really pretty useless outside of his little community of deer. And that gets him in trouble. Now, the last part of our study of a fable is to ask about how this applies to your own life. So what I'd like you to do to finish up this lesson, I'd like you to take some time and I'd like you to think about this question. How have you made mistakes in your life, or how are you making mistakes in your life right now by judging things according to their appearance and not judging things according to their purpose? How does this fable help you to make wiser decisions in your life? Okay? That's the end of lesson 4, the stag looking into the pool.